The obligation of law enforcement officers to tell the truth is not an isolated ethical principle or a narrow legal requirement. It is a fundamental element of democratic legitimacy. When officers lie, or when the system tolerates dishonesty, the damage reaches far beyond individual trials or specific communities. It touches the core of public confidence in the institutions designed to protect and serve. The result is a gradual corrosion of trust, a decline not only in the legitimacy of policing, but in the entire architecture of justice. Part 6 of this book explores the larger societal consequences of failures in candor. It addresses what happens when the public no longer believes that officers tell the truth or that the justice system holds them accountable when they do not. This section moves beyond courtroom dynamics to consider the cultural, political, and psychological costs of dishonesty in policing and how those costs reverberate across communities, generations, and nations. This is not just about the credibility of individual officers, it is about the credibility of law itself. The fragile currency of trust. Trust is the currency in which democratic governments do business. The authority of police officers, unlike that of private citizens, derives not from individual strength or community popularity, but from the collective consent of the governed. That consent is contingent. It is granted conditionally, renewed daily, and withdrawn when violated. In this framework, trust is not a static asset, it is a fragile, renewable resource that depends heavily on truthfulness. When an officer testifies in court, files a report, or engages with a member of the public, there is an implicit presumption that they are acting in good faith. That presumption gives officers a degree of deference and legal power that is otherwise unparalleled. But when officers are caught lying, especially in high-profile cases, the public's willingness to extend that presumption diminishes. Repeated breaches of truth damage not only the reputations of individual officers, but the institution of policing itself. This loss of trust is cumulative. Communities that have seen repeated dishonesty, whether in falsified arrest reports, manipulated body cam footage, or misleading public statements, begin to generalize. They assume that dishonesty is not the exception but the norm. Over time, this perception becomes self-reinforcing, and the space for genuine engagement, cooperation, or reform begins to shrink. Community cooperation and the erosion of legitimacy. Policing is a social contract. Law enforcement cannot function effectively without public cooperation. Witnesses who come forward, victims who report crimes, jurors who believe testimony, and neighborhoods that support investigations. All of these cooperative behaviors depend on trust. When communities no longer trust officers to tell the truth, this cooperation breaks down. Witnesses become reluctant. Victims stop reporting. Jurors grow skeptical of officer testimony. The clearance rate for violent crime declines. And communities become not only underserved, but unserved. This erosion of trust is especially pronounced in communities of color, where historic and contemporary experiences with dishonesty, coercion, and misconduct have created a deeply rooted skepticism toward law enforcement. When these communities see officers lie and those lies go unpunished, it reinforces the belief that the system is not designed to protect them, but to control them. The result is a legitimacy crisis. When the law is enforced by people seen as dishonest, the law itself loses moral authority. Citizens begin to question not only the enforcers of the law, but the law's justness. And when legitimacy erodes, so does compliance, not out of criminal intent, but from civic disillusionment, generational harm, and inherited distrust. The effects of dishonesty in law enforcement are not confined to individual cases or short-term outcomes. They echo across generations. Children who grow up seeing police lie to target or mistreat their parents are less likely to see officers as protectors. Teenagers who watch body cam footage contradict official statements learn early that institutional trust must be earned, not presumed. These experiences calcify into intergenerational distrust. Communities develop informal knowledge-shared narratives about which officers can't be trusted, which judges always believe the cops, and how to protect oneself from official lies. This informal system of survival competes with the formal system of justice, creating parallel understandings of authority that rarely converge. Over time, this inherited distrust becomes a form of social conditioning. It affects how individuals engage with school resource officers, campus police, and even other government officials. The ripple effects touch education, employment, civic participation, and mental health. When law enforcement dishonesty becomes normalized, the damage is not only institutional, it is cultural. It erodes the civic fabric that binds communities to their governments. Political polarization and reform fatigue. In the broader political arena, law enforcement dishonesty contributes to polarization and reform fatigue. Each new scandal, whether a falsified affidavit, a suppressed video, or a wrongful conviction based on perjured testimony, triggers outrage, but also exhaustion. Activists demand change, politicians promise reform, and departments issue new policies. Yet if the same patterns repeat, the public begins to disengage. This cyclical disappointment breeds cynicism. For those already critical of the justice system, each lie becomes confirmation of long-held beliefs. For those more trusting, repeated exposure to misconduct without accountability leads to disillusionment. Both reactions weaken the consensus needed for meaningful reform. Moreover, political actors often exploit these dynamics. Some use law enforcement dishonesty to justify radical distrust in government institutions. Others deny or minimize the problem, casting any criticism as anti-police sentiment. In this environment, dishonesty becomes a wedge issue rather than a unifying call to integrity. The result is gridlock. Good faith reformers are caught between denial and despair, and the systemic issue failure to institutionalize truthfulness remains unaddressed. The international perspective, human rights, and global perception. The consequences of law enforcement dishonesty extend beyond national borders. In a globalized world, the integrity of a country's justice system is a matter of international interest. When officers in the United States are seen planting evidence, lying under oath, or suppressing video evidence, especially in cases involving violence or racial injustice, it damages the country's credibility as a global advocate for human rights and rule of law. International watchdogs, including Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, have documented patterns of police dishonesty as part of broader critiques of U.S. law enforcement. These reports are cited in asylum proceedings, diplomatic forums, and human rights litigation. Moreover, countries struggling with corruption often point to U.S. misconduct as justification for their own failures. The message becomes, if it happens in America, how can we be expected to do better? This perception undermines not only the moral authority of U.S. institutions, but their strategic influence. From international policing initiatives to foreign aid conditionality, a reputation for internal integrity is essential. Without it, the United States cannot credibly export democratic principles abroad. Institutional stability and internal morale. The impact of dishonesty within law enforcement also affects the internal health of departments. Officers who act with integrity suffer when misconduct is ignored or tolerated. They are demoralized by double standards, disillusioned by failed accountability, and disincentivized to report wrongdoing. Over time, this leads to attrition, internal division, and a weakened culture of professionalism. Conversely, when departments promote truth-telling, reward transparency, and punish dishonesty, they create an environment in which ethical officers can thrive. This improves morale, reduces liability, and fosters a sense of institutional pride. Transparency, then, is not only a public good, it is an internal necessity. Agencies that protect dishonest officers damage their own legitimacy and destroy the trust of those within. Officers who value integrity must be able to trust their institutions, just as the public must be able to trust them. The road to restoration. Truth as the foundation. Restoring societal trust after decades of erosion requires more than policy tweaks or public relations campaigns. It requires a fundamental reorientation around truth. This means building systems that value candor, punish dishonesty, and make transparency the default rather than the exception. Trust cannot be demanded, it must be earned. And in a democracy, It is earned through truth. Law enforcement agencies that embrace this truth-centered ethos will find their legitimacy restored, their partnerships strengthened, and their communities engaged. Those that continue to obscure the truth, whether to protect their image, avoid liability, or preserve power, will find themselves increasingly isolated, distrusted, and unable to function. In the chapters that follow, we will explore in greater depth how community engagement and international models offer forward paths, where transparency and candor are not only possible, but expected. I am a dedicated author and researcher specializing in the intricate nexus of technology, law, and government. My extensive body of work includes a diverse array of books, scholarly articles, and policy papers that delve into the evolving challenges and opportunities presented by technological advancements within legal and governmental contexts. Through rigorous analysis and insightful exploration, I examine how emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, data privacy, and blockchain shape and are shaped by legislative frameworks, regulatory practices, and public policy initiatives. My publications aim to bridge the gap between technical innovation and legal governance, providing comprehensive resources for policymakers, legal professionals, technologists, and academics alike. By addressing critical issues like digital rights, cyber law, technology-driven governance, and the ethical implications of technological integration, my work contributes to the development of informed and adaptive legal systems capable of responding to rapid technological change. I am committed to fostering a deeper understanding of how technology influences governmental operations and legal standards, and vice versa, thereby promoting the creation of robust, equitable, and forward-thinking policies. In addition to my writing, I actively engage with government agencies, legal institutions, and technology firms to offer expertise and collaborate on initiatives that ensure the responsible and effective implementation of technology in public spheres. My dedication to exploring and elucidating the intersections of technology, law, and government underscores my commitment to advancing knowledge and facilitating informed decision-making in an increasingly digitalized world.